The Civil War was a disastrous time for the American people during the 1800s. America was split into two due to entirely different cultures between the North and the South. However, it was a huge time for change as well. Slavery was a heavily debated topic within America, and with the huge war being fought, President Abraham Lincoln planned to introduce a bill to end slavery once and for all. Lincoln thought it was a perfect time to lead the United States towards being a slave-free country. And through hard work and many trials and errors, President Abraham Lincoln persuaded many people to view slavery in a different light and made a second and final attempt to end it, creating the Emancipation Proclamation. This encouraged other bills to be made about freedom and rights, including the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment. The creation of the 13th Amendment changed how the United States viewed racism, equal rights, and freedom. Lincoln was always opposed to slavery, even as a young child. His uncle owned many slaves on a plantation, while his dad owned a few. He saw it as horrible and inhuman. In a speech in New Haven, Connecticut, he stated, "The owners of these slaves consider them property. The effect upon the minds of the owners is that of property, and nothing else. It induces them to insist upon all that will favorably affect its value as property, to demand laws and institutions and a public policy that shall increase and secure its value, and make it durable, lasting, and universal. The effect upon the minds of the owners is to persuade them that there is no wrong in it." The slaveholder does not like to be considered a mean fellow, for holding that species as property, and hence has no struggle within himself, and sets about arguing into the belief that slavery is right. But here in Connecticut, and at the North, slavery does not exist, and we see it through no such medium. To us, it appears natural to think that slaves are human beings, men, not property. This doesn't mean he wasn't racist, because despite what most schools teach their students, Lincoln was indeed, like most people in the United States at the time, a bit racist. Lincoln said this in the Lincoln-Douglas debate. "I have no disposition to introduce political and social equality between the white and black races. There is a physical difference between the two, which in my judgment will probably forever forbid their living together in terms of respect, social, and political equality, and inasmuch as it becomes a necessity, there should be some superiority somewhere. I, as well as Jude Douglas, am in favor of the race to which I belong having the superior position." But Lincoln still didn't like the thought of slavery, and he was determined to end it. It was one of his main goals as president, and he was always looking for opportunities to find a way to stop it. Most people don't know why the Civil War was originally started, but most people believe it was caused by the issue of slavery. This is actually false. The war was started because of many reasons, and here are a few. There were many different social and economic views in the North and the South. The South used a lot of cotton, and farming it required the presence of slaves in their minds. The northern part of the United States were buying the cotton and turning it into finished goods. Basically, the South were more of a farmland and plantation life, while the North were leading more of a city type of lifestyle. Another reason was there were arguments about greater state rights and about if federal government needed to have more power. Many people felt that the Constitution ignored the rights of the states and continued to act on their own. Many people felt that the states still should have the right to decide if they were willing to accept certain federal acts. All of this arguing created the idea of nullification, which means the states would have the right to rule certain federal acts unconstitutional. The government denied this right, though, and this caused people to get wound up and angry. The third reason that caused the Civil War to take place was many new states were emerging at a fast rate, and there was confliction about if they should be slave states or not. There were some feuds and fights between slavery states and non-slavery states, and there was even a physical fight that happened on the floor of the Senate when Charles Sumner, who was against slavery, was beat over the head by South Carolina's Senator Preston Brooks. There were other reasons that led up to the Civil War, but the thing that tipped the scale was when Lincoln was elected in 1860. That's when the South created the Declaration of Causes of Secession. It thought that Lincoln was anti-slavery and in favor of Northern interests.
But before Lincoln was even president, 7 states have already seceded from the Union, and those states were South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Then in April of 1861, Confederate soldiers fired on Union troops in South Carolina, and that started the Civil War.
Lincoln was trying to find a way to end slavery, but he thought the United States wasn't ready for such a huge change. The war was a big change, and that's when Lincoln thought he couldn't put the thought of no slavery for the whole country into the people's minds. His first attempt failed in trying to create a bill, and the bill was not passed. That didn't kill Lincoln's hopes, though, that one day there would be no slavery in the United States, and he kept on fighting. By far, the Civil War is America's most bloody war. Around 620,000 soldiers died from combat, accident, starvation, and disease during the Civil War. At the start of the war, the North had a population of 22 million people, while the South only had around 9 million people. The Civil War makes up about half of the total American deaths during war. 1,264,000 American soldiers have died, combining all war deaths. Later, after many years of fighting, the South side started to become weak, and Lincoln planned to reintroduce the 13th Amendment and end the war once and for all. The bill took its root, and the debate was close. Then, at last, the results showed that the 13th Amendment was passed. The Senate passed the amendment on April 8, 1864, of a vote to 38-6. That basically ended the Civil War. There were still some people who tried to fight even after it was pointless, like James Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln to try to hinder the North and rally up the South, but that, along with many other efforts to continue the war, failed and slavery was outlawed once and for all. The Emancipation Proclamation states, Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.